Things just took a shocking turn as we get a major new update on Chris Kreider's future with the New York Rangers, as well as some insight into what Chris Drury is planning to do with multiple star players on this team heading into next season. And some of the details are going to surprise Rangers fans. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 74% of you who watch these videos are not subscribe to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with your New York Rangers, this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers news. And of course, go down below, hit that free subscribe button, and you get to stay up to date with everything going on with the New York Rangers. But let's dive right into it. Things have taken a weird turn, that's for sure, a shocking turn with Chris Kreider. And there's a new report which has to do with his future as a New York Ranger from Frank Saravalli, who is breaking down, what a bunch of teams need to do in this year's offseason. And this is for 28 teams right now, because of course a few are still playing, but there's a lot of targets out there right now. And one of them is Chris Kreider, and his name's been thrown around in terms of the Toronto Maple Leafs and a couple other teams. But from Frank Saravalli, Chris Kreider is just 11 goals away from second all-time for the New York Rangers, which is pretty impressive and absolutely insane. And he isn't interested in leaving. He has a 15-team no-trade list that could complicate things for Chris Drury. But as we've learned, and I was going to bring up this point as a counterpoint, but as we've learned, anything is possible with Chris Drury. When he is motivated to make a change, he'll find a way. And I don't think it's necessarily him all the time. I think it is some of James Dolan's doing at times that, he wants certain moves to be made and made very quickly. But nonetheless, Chris Drury, 15-team no-trade list, no problem for Chris Drury, because he traded guys who've had no movement clauses in the past or put them on waivers and all of that. So it's happened before, or maybe threatened to put them on waivers. That's for sure. But, things like this have happened before. So I don't think a 15-team no-trade clause is going to stop Chris Drury. Now, he doesn't want to leave. So if none of the teams that, aren't on his list want him, then he's probably going to stay with the team. And I think there's a world where he does stay with the team. But if you want to contend, right, you have to move off Chris Kreider. He makes $6.5 million for the next 2 seasons. You're going to have to move off of him because you have $8.4 million in free cap right now. And a lot of that is going to go to a couple guys that you still need to sign. And even if you trade Keandre Miller, like we talked about in a video yesterday, you're still going to have to bolster the defense. You have to go out and sign somebody or trade for another guy on the defensive side, because your left side is as weak as I've ever seen, or in a long time. That's for sure. It's the weakest it's been in a long time. So they're going to have to figure that out. And this is from Forever Blue Shirts and Jim Cerny. Not a time to be sentimental. Now is the time to move off of Chris Kreider. I have to be honest. I feel like he kind of quit on the team last year when things weren't going right. When the going gets tough, he did not bear down and try to get things done. That's just what I saw, right? That's just my opinion. That's just from my point of view. But the biggest thing is, again, like I mentioned, the salary cap heading into next season. If you can free up even $4 million of his cap, you can do a lot with that, right? Especially if you trade Keandre Miller, you can figure out what to do with a lot of that. So the number one reason to move Chris Kreider is to create more room under the salary cap. It's exactly why Chris Drury went to such lengths to move on from Gaudreau and Trouba, which were borderline unethical. A lot of people talked about that. We talked about it back then. We've moved on at this point. But veterans making too much money, where salary cap space outweighs a player's value to the roster. And he's going to be 35 next year. So that's something you have to not even start to consider. I mean, now is the time to move off of Chris Kreider. And listen, it's going to be a sad day when it eventually happens, right? Longest tenured Ranger. He's so close to being second all time in scoring, right? We know all of these things. It's going to be difficult to see him go because he's provided so many good moments, and, his career has been fantastic to this point. But you have to know when it's time to move off of a player. And when, we've seen it. The younger guys are coming up now, right? They've made the shift. It happened last year. They made the decision in the early days of the season to, when Jacob Trouba was on the way out, that was your decision. You made the decision there. So Kreider's owed $6.5 million each of the next 2 seasons to help reshape their roster. The Rangers need more room under the cap, and removing Kreider's AAV would help big time. Now, if you can move all 6.5, that's fantastic. What I said earlier about removing at least $4 million, that's if you retain some salary, which I think you're probably going to have to do. And even if you do, free up whatever salary cap space you can, because now is the time to bring up the kids. It is the younger generation's time. They have to learn to develop these kids, and these guys are going to lead the way if done properly, right? And I think, with what happened last season, I don't understand why Chris Kreider was in the lineup half of the time if he was that injured and he had that illness and all of that. Why was he still in the lineup every single night? Give the kids a chance. And you can see it here. Removing Kreider from the mix, in theory, creates an open spot for somebody else to take, right? If you take him off the second line, Will Cooley, who spent some time on the second line, will move up to the second line where he looked good at times when he was playing with JT Miller as well. He was playing more physical. Move him up. Then you can get Brett Berard in there on the third line, right? And then you can fill out your fourth line with maybe Adam Edstrom, who's a great penalty killer. Matt Rempe should have a spot in the lineup more times than not, especially with the way he played in the second half of the season after he took that dumb suspension, right? But he played really well in the second half. So give these guys a shot. It's their team now. Let's see what they can do. And if they're not playing well, then you got to figure that out. But you need to figure out your development staff too, right? You have to figure that out. So it's very interesting. But again, it's not going to be easy. He has a 15 trade, no team. Sorry, it's 15 team, no trade list. And, you're going to have to figure that out. You can still trade him to more than half of the rest of the league, right? So I don't see that being too much of an obstacle if they really want to get it done. And again, you just got to give the kids a chance. And there are so many reports on this from so many different insiders. Peter Baugh weighing in as well that, what are they going to do with Chris Kreider? Is it time? And not only Chris Kreider, but a lot of people are starting to point fingers at Artemi Panarin as well, because this contract is coming up shortly as well. Next year is the last year. He is eligible for a contract extension this July 1st. So if he doesn't get one this summer, I wonder if the questions are going to, start to pick up as the season starts, because, they're going to have to figure that out sooner or later. And the argument in this article, which I disagree with, is Artemi Panarin doesn't dominate in the playoffs, and that's why they should move off of him. Panarin has averaged just nearly 1.3 points per game in a Rangers sweater during the regular season, and he had 89 points in 80 games. Obviously, last year he had an incredible season, but everyone did. And though there's hardly been bad in the postseason, Panarin has only managed 35 points in 46 playoff games with New York. But I will say, I don't think the playoff performance is a problem for Artemi Panarin, because if you take a look here at last season, 16 games, he had 15 points, almost a point a game player. He was up there with Lafreniere. A couple of years ago in 21-22, when they went to the conference final as well, played 20 games, he had 16 points. So you'd like to see him at about a point a game for that money, of course, right? And with some of the other guys making that type of money around the league are producing at, but still, I don't think that he's not producing. Does he look dangerous in the games? We could debate that, right? Maybe that's more what they're talking about, but I don't think that's the reason to move off of him. The reason to move off of him would be because he's getting a little bit older, right? That would be the reason. But I still think you maybe re-sign him, right? But we got to see how the season goes. I don't think they should give him a contract extension July 1st. I know the questions are going to start to pick up. I would absolutely expect that about a contract extension. But you probably go into the season, see how things are going, and maybe you trade him at the trade deadline, right? You got to start considering these things because the team is getting younger. So they're moving into a different type of window. I still think they want to retool and compete, but you got to start to at least consider these things if the team does not play up to the standard that, is going to be set at the start of the year, which by future captain JT Miller, I think is going to be a very high standard that we want to make the playoffs and we actually want to look like we can maybe win the Stanley Cup. So it's going to be interesting heading into next season. Let me know in the comments what you think about moving off of Chris Kreider, the fact that he doesn't want to leave. An interesting turn of events there. And Artemi Panarin, we got to start at least talking about it at this point. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.